in the last half an hour that the lifeboats from Dover and the Womer lifeboats were heading back at pace with a casualty on board. We're looking at the lifeboats heading into harbour now.
Something has snapped inside Britain's border force, and it's not just the usual operational pressure or long hours. It's trust. It's morale. It's a belief that what they are doing still matters, and that someone, anyone, in power is being honest with them. Because when nearly 1,900 trained officers, people embedded in one of the most high-stakes government departments, quietly band together to expose a lie, that's not just frustration. That's collapse. This leaked report is damning. With tensions rising across the UK and thousands taking to the streets of London right now, it's more important than ever to see the full picture. If you want to stay updated on the situation as it unfolds, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I'm covering the angles the mainstream media might miss, like this video if you believe in unfiltered reporting. But it's not surprising to the people on the ground. They've been living this chaos while the government has worked overtime to rewrite the story. Not just twist it, not just spin it, fully rework it until the public sees a version of the truth that's been carefully scrubbed, smoothed, and rendered politically safe. And what's the cost of that narrative control? Operational failure. These officers are watching, day after day, as the number of channel crossings surges well past what the system was designed to handle. At Dover, things have already exceeded long-term safety thresholds. But the official line? It still reads as manageable, controlled, contained, because someone upstairs decided the real numbers were too risky to share. We're talking about frontline staff being handed instructions not to speak frankly, not to use alarming language, not to escalate incident reports, even when situations were clearly spiraling out of control. Their job has shifted. It's no longer about protecting borders. It's about protecting narratives. This isn't just a few bad decisions. It's not one failed policy. What's being described here is a culture, a deliberate system, that prizes political optics over actual security. And it's not just the officers saying it. The internal reports, the memos, the deleted warnings, they all point to the same thing. This wasn't an accident. It was a choice. Every softened risk assessment, every redacted memo, every omitted warning about overcrowded facilities, every adjusted number that turned crisis into pressure. It all amounts to the same conclusion. Britain's border management has been hollowed out by dishonesty, and now the people keeping the system running are saying enough. They've signed what is effectively a letter of no confidence, a mutiny against the very institution they serve, not out of disloyalty, but because the loyalty they showed was not returned. The officers say they've been used, not just overworked, not just stretched thin, used to support a fiction. A fiction that tells the public the system is fine while they're up to their necks in something far closer to collapse. I know things feel really heavy in the UK right now. There's a lot of division and noise on the streets, but I want this channel to be a place where we can come together. If you want to be part of a supportive community, please subscribe. And like this video to show some love to everyone feeling anxious about the state of things right now. Stay safe out there, everyone. And that fiction isn't just hurting morale. It's endangering national security. Think about what this means. If officers are working under deliberately manipulated data, if their internal warnings are being deleted or rewritten, then who's actually tracking the crisis? Who's responsible when reality can't make it past the first level of management without getting whitewashed? This kind of internal censorship isn't just irresponsible. It's dangerous. It erodes a chain of command. It creates false confidence in a system that is actively failing. And it pushes good people, trained, capable professionals, into silence. The report makes it clear this isn't just about the number of people crossing the channel. This is about what happens when a government chooses denial over disclosure, when it tells the public everything is fine, even as internal documents scream otherwise. The crisis at Dover is already over the line. Overcapacity, overwhelmed, and openly misrepresented. But the situation isn't unique to one location. This is part of a broader systemic rot, one that's being held together not by reform, but by narrative control. And the cost of that control is rising. The culture described in the report is one where transparency is treated as a threat, where off-the-record whispers have replaced official briefings, where people are so afraid to speak up, they are passing warnings through back channels just to get anyone, to listen. And yet, instead of being met with action, they are met with more of the same. More suppression, more manipulation, more attempts to massage the facts into something politically convenient. This is a credibility crisis, not just for the border force, for the entire government apparatus. Because when the truth is so systematically buried, what's left to trust? Officers are saying they no longer believe the public is being told the truth. Worse, they believe their work is being used to hide that truth, that their uniforms, their reports, their authority is being leveraged to create the illusion of order where there is none. They didn't sign up to be spokespeople. They signed up to secure the country. And now they are trapped in a role that demands silence while everything falls apart around them. And it is falling apart. Dover has passed every internal metric for safe operation. Migrant numbers are exceeding what the system can physically handle. But none of this makes it into the official communications. Instead, the data is truncated, sanitized, removed. Even internal alerts, those designed to trigger rapid response, are being filtered. Zones marked as at risk of losing control have had those warnings stripped before they reach senior officials. You've seen the headlines, but the atmosphere down here is completely different. Subscribe so you don't miss the raw footage I'm releasing later this week, and like this video to help push this unfiltered reporting up the algorithm. Not because the danger wasn't real, but because acknowledging it would be politically inconvenient. And what does that say about priorities? If national security takes a backseat to PR, then the border isn't just porous, it's vulnerable. Vulnerable to failure, vulnerable to exploitation, and vulnerable to public backlash the moment these truths can no longer be buried. The officers aren't just raising operational red flags. They are calling this what it is, a moral crisis. They say continuing to operate under this level of dishonesty is not just exhausting, it's unethical. They feel betrayed by a system that expects loyalty while offering none in return. A system that silences truth-tellers and rewards those who keep the narrative polished. And that kind of betrayal leaves a mark, not just on the individuals forced to work inside it, but on the system's long-term integrity. You can't run a security operation on lies. You can't fix a crisis you refuse to admit exists. And you certainly can't keep the public's trust when you're actively erasing the evidence that things have gone wrong. This is more than a border problem. It's a governance problem. And it won't be solved with a reshuffled cabinet or another statement filled with vague reassurances. The truth is out. The mask is off. And now the government has a choice: confront the crisis or continue pretending it doesn't exist until it can't pretend anymore. Because the officers aren't backing down. They've seen the cost of silence, and they've decided it's too high. The mutiny is real. It's grounded in facts, in testimony, in leaked internal documents. And it's not going away. So if you're watching this, and you're asking, what now? Here's the answer. Now, we pay attention. Now, we ask questions, loudly. And now, we share the truth. Like this video, drop a comment, share it, and subscribe, because this isn't just another news story. It's a warning. The people who were supposed to stay silent just spoke up. Let's make sure we hear them. And here's where it all converges. At the edge of trust, public accountability, and a border force that no longer believes in the mission it's being told to carry out. This isn't some isolated flare-up. This is a foundational crisis that's been ignored, downplayed, and strategically buried. And now, those who've been forced to live it day in and day out are saying what no press conference ever will. The UK's borders are no longer being honestly managed. Let that sink in. We're not talking about an overworked department needing more resources. We're talking about a full-scale credibility implosion. Frontline officers, the ones physically stationed at the edge of Britain's national sovereignty, with tensions rising across the UK and thousands taking to the streets of London right now, it's more important than ever to see the full picture. If you want to stay updated on the situation as it unfolds, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I'm covering the angles the mainstream media might miss, like this video if you believe in unfiltered reporting, are no longer willing to pretend. And the reason? Because the truth has been removed from the equation. According to the internal testimonies and reports, officers are being asked to participate in a manufactured version of events, where overcrowding at Dover is omitted from reports, Where migrant numbers are adjusted for appearance, and where clear warnings about breakdowns in control are scrubbed clean before being passed on to decision makers. That's not administrative oversight. That's intentional deception. It's not like these officers didn't try to raise the alarm through official channels. They did. But what they found was a system that didn't want the problem solved. It wanted the problem disguised. And now that the disguise is cracking, the government's silence is louder than ever. You have nearly 1,900 trained professionals saying, in black and white, that the border is not under control, that the data being shared publicly is false, and that they've been systematically told not to speak up. And the official response? Nothing. Not even a denial with substance. Just a wall of silence, PR fluff, and business as usual. Because if they engage with the truth, even for a second, they risk unraveling the entire narrative that's been holding this together. That's the gamble. That's what this all comes down to, appearance versus reality. And for years, the government bet on appearance. Control the numbers. Downplay the risks. Avoid triggering public alarm. Maintain the idea that the system is stable, even if it's crumbling from the inside. But here's the problem with that strategy. When the people maintaining the illusion decide they won't do it anymore, the whole thing collapses. And that's exactly what we're seeing. This is a revolt born from exhaustion, yes, but also from ethics. These officers aren't staging a walkout over workload. They're refusing to participate in a lie. They are saying, we won't be the face of a cover-up. And that should terrify anyone paying attention. Because if the Border Force, the institution responsible for the physical security of the UK, is being forced to operate with censored data, fake performance reports, and a total breakdown in trust between officers and leadership, what does that say about how crises are managed elsewhere? What does it say about what the public's being told? What Parliament is being told? This is how accountability dies, not in scandal, but in silence, in omission, in carefully curated updates that scrub out the real danger and present a version of reality that doesn't exist on the ground. Think about what's at stake here. We're talking about decisions that affect national security, border integrity, and the livelihoods of officers who are being... I know things feel really heavy in the UK right now. There's a lot of division and noise on the streets, but I want this channel to be a place where we can come together. If you want to be part of a supportive community, please subscribe. And like this video to show some love to everyone feeling anxious about the state of things right now. Stay safe out there, everyone. Asked to ignore every alarm bell and just keep the machine running. Officers who are being pushed past the point of burnout, while being told to keep smiling, keep quiet, and keep rewriting the truth to suit the headlines. At what point does that stop being policy and start being fraud? And here's what makes this story even more urgent. The longer the public believes everything is fine, the more emboldened the political machine becomes. They see silence as permission. And that silence, it's being engineered. This is where the manipulation becomes a weapon. By editing reports, by deleting capacity warnings, by encouraging staff not to escalate, they are not just hiding the truth, they're controlling the public's ability to demand better. You can't fight what you can't see. And they built an entire communication strategy around making sure you don't see the mess. But now, you've seen it, because the officers said enough. They said, we're not going to pretend anymore. They knew the risks, internal backlash, career damage, retaliation. But they did it anyway, not because they are political, but because they are human. Because they are tired of cleaning up a mess they are not allowed to name. They are watching zone fill past capacity. They are watching alerts get deleted. They are watching policies be made on fake numbers. And finally, they said, no more. This letter, this coordinated act of dissent, it's not just a protest. It's a line in the sand. It's a direct message to the British public. You're being lied to. We've been forced to lie for them. And we won't do it anymore. So now what? Will the government admit what's happening? Will anyone be held accountable for manipulating data during a national crisis? Or will the political PR machine do what it always does? Wait out the outrage, deflect the facts, and hope the public moves on before they start asking too many questions? Because this time, that strategy might not work. Too many people know. Too much has been exposed. And the cracks aren't just visible, they are structural. And if leadership thinks this is just a messaging problem, they are wrong. This is a trust problem. A deep, systemic erosion of confidence in the people who are supposed to protect the truth. And that's what this story is really about. Not just the 14,000 channel crossings, not just the overflowing holding zones or the exhausted staff at Dover. It's about what happens when a government loses the moral right to claim control because it spent too long faking it. This is what collapse looks like before the headlines catch up. And the public? They are done being placated. They are done being told, you've seen the headlines, but the atmosphere down here is completely different. Subscribe so you don't miss the raw footage I'm releasing later this week. And like this video to help push this unfiltered reporting up the algorithm. Everything is under control when it clearly isn't. They are done hearing the words operational integrity from people who've buried every scrap of it under political self-preservation. There's a reason the officers didn't leak this through official unions or filtered chains of command. They knew it would be buried, so they went direct. Because when the system fails to fix itself, it's up to those inside it to force the reckoning. And that's exactly what they've done. And here's what makes it worse. What makes this whole mess feel even more infuriating. The silence is strategic. This isn't just a government caught off guard. This isn't a we didn't know situation. The documents, the emails, the scrub reports, and the coordinated language control, they all show the same thing. They knew. And they decided the risk of telling the truth was greater than the risk of letting the situation spiral. They saw the migrant crossing numbers surging. They saw Dover exceed every safety threshold. They saw the internal alerts warning that containment zones were moments away from total collapse. And what did they do? They edited. They reworded. They sanitized. They took that chaos and filtered it until it read like a minor inconvenience, something the public wouldn't notice and Parliament wouldn't need to debate. And if you're wondering who gave those orders, that's the point. It's deliberately murky. There's no smoking gun memo that says, delete this now. But the pattern is clear. The omissions are consistent. The language is coordinated. This isn't a miscommunication. It's a policy of don't tell the full story unless you absolutely have to. And so far, no one has had to. Because as long as the headlines stay quiet and the reports stay redacted, no one at the top is held accountable. But now, nearly 1,900 officers have blown that wide open. They are done playing along. Done watching frontline chaos get buried under political convenience. Done watching real emergencies get rewritten into manageable pressure. Let's talk about that number for a second. 1,900. That's not a handful of disgruntled employees. That's a coordinated, overwhelming consensus from inside the system. That's critical mass. And what are they saying? They are saying the government has lost control of the border, and worse, is lying about it. Not spinning, not sugarcoating, lying. Actively concealing the severity of the crisis, even from its own internal structures, just to maintain the illusion of competence. The front line is calling it what it is. Betrayal, not just of them, but of the public. Of the idea that national security is based on facts and reality, not narrative management. Because when officers are told not to include overcrowding in their logs, with tensions rising across the UK and thousands taking to the streets of London right now, it's more important than ever to see the full picture. If you want to stay updated on the situation as it unfolds, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I'm covering the angles the mainstream media might miss. Like this video if you believe in unfiltered reporting. When risk assessments are rewritten to sound more optimistic. When zones approaching critical failure are labeled as under review instead of urgent danger. That's not operational prudence. That's cover-up. And every day that goes unaddressed, more trust disappears. The truth is, this isn't just a story about illegal crossings. It's a story about a government that decided to hide dysfunction instead of fixing it. It's a story about a system that asks its frontline staff to show up, suit up, and clean up a crisis, only to be told they can't speak honestly about what they're experiencing. And now, they've had enough. They've blown the whistle. They've laid out every manipulated number, every buried report, every act of narrative control, and still, not a single official has stepped forward with accountability. Because admitting failure? That political suicide. So instead, they hope the story fades. That the officers return to silence. That the public forgets. But how do you forget a warning like this? These officers didn't go public because they wanted attention. They did it because the situation is now so bad, and the institutional response so hollow that this was the only option left. They were watching the same crisis the public was hearing about, but the stories didn't match. The reality was chaos. The report said everything was fine. And when they tried to close that gap with facts, the system erased the facts. So now, they are bypassing it entirely, speaking directly to anyone who will listen. They are not asking for applause. They are demanding transparency. They are demanding that the people at the top finally stop pretending and start governing. Because here's what no one wants to say out loud. If the truth were released in full, if the actual migrant numbers, risk levels, and safety failures were made public, the political fallout would be catastrophic. We're talking about a government that would be exposed not just for failing to contain a crisis, but for actively deceiving the public about its scale and severity. This is bigger than immigration policy. This is about governance itself. If a country's leaders can knowingly suppress national security failures, manipulate internal data, and coerce staff into silence, what part of that is democratic? What part of that reflects accountability? The officers say it clearly. They've been asked to choose between doing their job and protecting a lie. And now they're refusing to do both. They say morale is in freefall. Trust has eroded. Official briefings have been replaced by off-the-record whispers because nobody believes what's being shared formally. Not the numbers, not the updates, not the reassurances. And when that happens, when your own security force starts treating internal communication like propaganda, it's game over. Because no system can survive when the people running it no longer believe it's being run honestly. That's the real threat here, not just the crisis of the coastline, but the crisis at the heart of the institution tasked with protecting it. When truth is optional and narrative takes precedence, security becomes performance. And Britain, according to its own officers, is now performing control while experiencing collapse. So what happens next? That depends entirely on whether the public, the press, and the few remaining honest officials left are willing to confront this mess head-on. Not spin it, not bury it, confront it. Because the longer this crisis is treated like a messaging problem, the worse it gets. The officers have done their part. They've risked their careers to say what the system refused to admit. They've laid out every red flag, clearly, factually, and without political spin. Now the spotlight is on the people in charge. Do they double down on denial? Or do they finally start telling the truth? That choice will define what happens to Britain's border system, to its credibility, to the public's trust. But either way, the illusion is already broken. The truth is out, and the people who tried to hide it no longer have control over the story. Here we are, at a tipping point. The kind of moment where, if history is any guide, a single misstep could send everything spiraling out of control. But what's most unnerving isn't the magnitude of the crisis itself. It's that we're at a moment of reckoning, and the government is still trying to downplay what's happening. Let's be clear, the system is broken. It has been for a while now. But what's different now, what's utterly impossible to ignore, is that the very people tasked with keeping it intact, the officers on the ground who are seeing the chaos firsthand, are no longer willing to stay silent about it. They've drawn a line in the sand. Nearly 1,900 officers have signed their names to a letter, not just saying they are fed up with the operational failings. They are saying, outright, that the government is lying about the situation. These aren't whistleblowers looking for a headline. They are the frontline workers, the ones witnessing the system collapse in real time, day after day. They've had enough. These officers aren't just raising alarms because they are overworked. Yes, they're exhausted. Yes, they are stretched to breaking point. But that's not the crux of the issue. The real problem is that they are being asked to mask the truth. They're being told, time and again, to rewrite reports, to adjust numbers, and to bury the most urgent warnings in bureaucratic red tape, all for the sake of making it look like everything is under control. But as they pointed out, they can't keep pretending that the border is safe when it's anything but. Dover has already exceeded its long-term safety thresholds. The numbers are growing by the day, and the systems are failing. But rather than confronting the crisis, the government has chosen to ignore it and, worse still, to deliberately misrepresent the facts. When internal alerts warn of zones reaching critical capacity, these warnings are removed from official communications. When overcrowding hits dangerous levels, it's softened in reports to avoid triggering alarms. The very systems that are supposed to protect the UK's borders are under siege, but the people responsible for responding are burying the evidence. This is more than just operational mismanagement. This is strategic deception. It's not just a case of not doing enough. It's about actively making it look like everything is fine when it's not. The narrative being spun, both to the public and to senior officials, is that things are under control, that the system is managing the flow of migrants, that everything is within operational parameters. That's the lie. And now, after months of keeping quiet, the officers are refusing to be part of it any longer. Think about the scale of what's being exposed here. Nearly 2,000 people who have spent their careers protecting the country are telling us that the truth has been manipulated. This isn't a small problem. This is a systemic issue that goes all the way to the top. These officers are not just frustrated. They are fundamentally at odds with their superiors because they believe their own government is failing to tell the truth about what's happening on the ground. It's one thing to hear a lone voice in the wilderness calling out for help. It's another thing entirely when nearly 2,000 experienced professionals stand up and say, "We can't keep doing this. We're being asked to lie." That's not a protest. That's an emergency. This isn't about pushing a political agenda. This isn't about taking sides. This is about a moral crisis within the very system that is supposed to keep us safe. And what's being exposed is that the system is not being managed for the sake of safety. It's being managed for the sake of politics. The numbers are being adjusted, the risks downplayed, and the truth buried under layers of bureaucratic doublespeak to avoid embarrassing anyone in power. And let's not forget, this isn't just about an administrative failure. The officers are speaking out because real lives are being impacted. The migrant crossings themselves aren't just numbers on a report. Behind each crossing is a human being, often in desperate circumstances, and the system that's supposed to process and protect them is breaking down under the strain. People are being put into overcrowded, unsafe conditions, and rather than addressing the problem, the government has focused on pretending it doesn't exist. This is where the breakdown in trust comes into sharp focus. The officers on the ground, the ones who actually see the people and the conditions, no longer trust that the system can handle the workload. They no longer trust that the data they are providing will even be seen as valid, let alone acted upon. And more importantly, they no longer trust that their leadership is prioritizing public safety over the need to protect a political narrative. The stakes here are high. National security, public trust, and moral integrity are all on the line. And rather than stepping up to confront the crisis, the government has doubled down on its narrative, sweeping the truth under the rug and hoping no one notices. And what about the officers who are still working within this system? They are burnt out, broken, and increasingly bitter. They have been working tirelessly in conditions that should be unsustainable, and yet somehow they've been told to keep smiling, to keep going, to keep reporting that things are under control. But they know better. And they are tired of carrying the weight of that lie. So now, with no other choice, they've gone public. This is what a moral breakdown looks like. When the people who are supposed to safeguard the country's borders no longer believe in the system they are upholding, you know you have a fundamental problem. This isn't just a story about numbers or operational overload. It's a story about trust. And once that trust breaks, everything else starts to crumble. We're at a critical juncture now. There's only so long that the truth can be buried before it breaks free, and when it does, it's going to be explosive. The political fallout from this will be monumental. The public will demand answers. The officers will continue to speak out, and the government will be left to answer some very tough questions about the choices it made along the way. So, what now? This crisis is far from over. The officers have made their position clear. And now, the question is whether the government will face up to the truth. Will they admit to the scale of the problem, or will they continue to pretend it's manageable, risking even further damage to public confidence in the system? Will the political narrative continue to be prioritized over actual security, or will there be a shift toward transparency and genuine accountability? Because right now, the truth is not just hidden. It's actively suppressed. And that's the most dangerous part of all. When the government starts manipulating data, suppressing vital warnings, and silencing its own workers, that's a breach of the public trust. And once that trust is gone, it's almost impossible to get it back. But the officers have spoken up, and they've forced this issue into the open. They've exposed the cracks in the system, and now the ball is in the government's court. Will they continue to downplay the situation, Or will they step up and take responsibility for the mess they've allowed to fester? Will they continue to hide the truth, or will they finally start telling it? This is a moment of reckoning for Britain's government, and it's a moment that the public must not ignore. Because when the truth comes out, and make no mistake, the consequences will be far-reaching. The question is, how long can the government keep the truth buried, and how much longer can it afford to keep pretending everything is fine? The truth is out now, and there's no going back. The silence that's been deafening for months is finally being shattered by the brave voices of the officers who can't sit back anymore, who can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it clearly isn't. This isn't just about border control. It's about something far more important. Trust. Trust in the system. Trust in those who are supposed to protect us. And that trust has been eroded deliberately to protect a narrative rather than a nation. Let's not sugarcoat it. What's happening now isn't just a policy failure or a bureaucratic mishap. It's a systemic issue that goes straight to the top. The government chose to ignore the reality on the ground because it was easier than confronting the truth. It was easier to suppress the data, soften the risk warnings, and spin the numbers into something more palatable than to face the harsh, inconvenient reality. And now, the officers, those who have been on the front lines, dealing with the fallout, witnessing the chaos, are saying, enough. Nearly 1,900 of them have signed on, agreeing that the system is not just overrun, but actively misrepresented. Their careers, their livelihoods, are now in jeopardy, yet they are risking it all because they know the stakes. This is about more than just them. It's about the integrity of the entire border system, the integrity of the government, and the future of the trust we place in those institutions. This isn't a small-scale issue. This is an issue that threatens the very foundation of governance. When a government system so desperately needs to maintain a false appearance of order, when it deliberately hides the truth for political expediency, it's not just a problem for those working within that system. It's a problem for the whole country. It's a failure of leadership, and it's one that could have long-lasting consequences for national security. Every moment the government refuses to acknowledge the scale of this crisis, the deeper the hole gets. The officers on the front lines are watching as the system strains to hold itself together, and they're increasingly aware that it won't be able to much longer. So they've stepped forward to make sure the truth isn't buried again. The message is clear. The longer this is ignored, the more dangerous it becomes. The more people suffer, and the more trust is lost. Now, the question is, what happens next? The government has to answer for its silence. It can't just hope this story fades away. It can't keep hiding behind carefully worded statements that don't reflect the reality. The truth has been exposed, and it's not going back into the shadows. We've reached a point where we, as citizens, have to demand more. We have to stand with those officers who put everything on the line to say, this isn't right. Because if we don't, we're allowing the cycle to continue. We're letting the government get away with failing to address the real issues. The people who are responsible for our safety are being silenced, and the longer we stay quiet, the more damage will be done. So, let's make sure this conversation doesn't end here. Like this video. Share it. Leave your thoughts. Let's keep pushing for the truth, because in a moment like this, the only thing that matters is the truth. We can't afford to look away.